there's an issue that came up on Shabbos. Where was everybody on Shabbos? What did they read for Haftarah? Did they insert psukim at the end of the Haftarah? They read the Rosh Chodesh Haftarah, but then they read a little bit of Machar Chodesh. Show of hands. Did they read that? Remember David Jonas on Machar Chodesh? Do you remember where you were on Shabbos?
Yeah, it was
Shemayim Kisi, but they didn't add psukim. Good. So let's see what's the issue. Someone's sending questions. Yeah, it did happen in the past. It's in your art scroll Chumash. You look over there. We have a stone Chumash over there. They mentioned that some have this minhag that when Rosh Chodesh is also Sunday, assuming 2-day Rosh Chodesh, so you read Hashemayim Kisi, and the next day, because the next day is Rosh Chodesh, you also add the first and last pasuk from the Haftarah that would be Machar Chodesh, because tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh and it's the main day. So to tell people, this is rejected by the Beis Yosef. Let's look at the sources. I sent it out as did I send it out as a PDF to everybody? No, maybe I didn't. So
yes, I think you did.
I did? Oh, good. See, I'm not as forgetful as I think I am. Maybe I am forgetful. Well, yes.
But this is not just an issue on certain occasions. There are communities which read every Shabbat after the Haftarah Go Aleinu. So if they don't read the Haftarah from Yirmiyahu, that's always a problem.
Okay, so
or a question.
It might not be a problem. There's two mitigating factors we're going to see that make it less problematic. I'll give it away right now. If it's not written there, it's less of a problem. And if you say it after the brachas, it's even less of a problem because you're already not in Haftarah. Yeah, he just mentioned that. They say that's a little bit of a problem. If they're writing it into there, we know what you can't do. If you're writing a piyut or writing a siddur even, so you could edit that. You can say, well, I'd rather repeat the chorus of this piyut, whether it's Adon Olam or Lechadodi or whatever it is. You can repeat words or lines or whatever it is. Why? Because it's a piyut. Assuming you could say the piyut, so you could write your own piyut, right? Or you could leave out the chorus, whatever it may be. You could abbreviate the piyut. You don't have to say the whole thing. You know what? There's more standards to Lechadodi than the sidders. Also, the Star Spangled Banner. How many stanzas are in the Star Spangled Banner? I don't know, like 7. How many do they sing? 1, right? Come on, man. So show some patriotism. It's July. We're only a week after July 4th. Okay, it's still today's the Yontif Achron of July 4th. Well, right? If July 4th is the first day of Yontif, today would be the Shmini Atzeres of July 4th. If I'm not mistaken, the guys in America correct me about that. So if you're patriot,
we have Tashlumin for the 4th of July.
Yeah, Tashlumin. It's Chol Hamoed. We had Chol Hamoed until yesterday. So, what was I trying to say? So when you have a Navi though, a text of Tanakh, you can't adjust that text. You can't add words. You can't add psukim. Let's read what it says in the Mishnah Megillah. It says Medalgim b'Navi ve'ein medalgim b'Torah. I added Rashi's Parish in parentheses. Medalgim b'Navi means from parsha to parsha. Just skip a section and read that. And we actually do that. By the way, there's a few examples, most of which are on holidays. We do this on Pesach. We do this on Shavuos. We do this on Tisha B'Av. The classic haftarahs that you find in in your siddur or your chumash, whatever is your machzor, actually make this mention. Like then to finish on a good note, roll the navi a little bit, or the way it's printed, you don't even notice that there's a jump. Okay, so that's the way some haftarahs are, but we don't do this in the Torah. And Rashi explains why. And it turns out we actually do this in the Torah. There's a little bit of a shock with the Tarya here. The Kohen Gadol actually did this when he read the Torah on Yom Kippur. He went from what's known as Parshas Emor, from Achremos to Emor. That's a few columns later. So how is he able to get away with that? So one, it's Be'inyan Echad. That's the answer over here. Be'inyan Echad. He sticks to the topic is what do you call it? Is Yom Kippur. And nowadays, when we do such a thing, we do it between aliyahs. We don't roll the Torah or skip a few psukim or even a parsha, whatever it is. When we're reading the Torah nowadays, the one time, according to the standard minhag, the 1-year cycle with all its various special readings for holidays and things like that, when do we do this? The only one time that's in the current minhag is?
Or you skip.
Yeah, well, we actually skip between aliyahs. Yeah, on a fast day. They do this on fast days. They skip between the Kohen and the Levi aliyahs. Okay, first you read, yeah. Vaychal Moshe and Vayivsol. So Vaychal is usually in the way everybody's all the sofrim are copying from each other from one tikkun. Vaychal is right in the middle of the page on the right side. It's on the right of the column the way they printed it, and Vayivsol is one over, and Vayomer Hashem Moshe Psolacha begins its own parsha. It's a parsha psucha. Okay, about a page and a half later. So that's how you find it. Yeah. I end up that's the parsha I've read the most for Spartan for some reason. Well, I'm used to I used to be more of a Bal Kriya, but the place across the street, we have a shtibel, right? It's officially Spartan. How many people want to read the Torah on a fast afternoon already? You do it, okay? They might not have the usual Bal Kriya, so that's when I end up reading. Okay, and then they bring another brisa over here at the conclusion of the Gemara, which is Ein Medalgin Mi Navi LeNavi. Okay, so if you're reading one Navi, you could actually, in the middle of the Haftarah, if you're reading out of a scroll, you could actually roll the Navi and go a little bit forward like we do in Yechezkel, which we read on the first day of Shavuos or the day of Shavuos. We start with the beginning of the Yechezkel, and then we go to the end of the Sima where you get to the pasuk Latisa Eini Ruach. That's what we do. And on the first day of Passover, we read about Joshua and the first Passover in the land of Israel, and then you skip to the part where it describes the beginning of the siege of Jericho. So you do that, but you can't skip from Navi to Navi. But by the way, there's a reason why Rashi says you shouldn't do it. Rashi says over here that it issues of Kvodat Tzibur and taking up too much time and confusing people. Mashma, that people are going to point out to Rashi that if the Rashi is correct for these explanations, so you know what that means? If somehow you could eliminate the time that takes to roll the Navi, or you can eliminate the confusion aspect because now everybody's reading the Haftarah out of a printed book or some other thing, or the way it's written, Haftarah book, even if it's handwritten, but there is no gap. The pasuk is right there, like you said. you don't know that there's a skip there, so you could get away with this maybe, right?
Then why do they say you're allowed to infer if it's confusing?
No, Treyasar is not. Treyasar is one book. You're going to say that the Havamina was, I can't go from, Hosea to Amos because they're two different Nevi'im. Kamash Balan, rolling from Hosea to Amos, or from what we do is from Shuva Yisrael is also in Amos, I think, and then we go to Micha. We do this twice. Micha, when Micha has Miel Kamocha, his attributes about God. So that's how we conclude the Haftarah for Shabbos Shuva and the Haftarah for Yonah. We read the book of Yonah, and then we skip the end of Micha. We read the Shabbos Shuva Haftarah. Someone's writing something. Yeah, he's going to correct me or fill it in for me. Shuva Yisrael is in Hosea. Yeah, it's at the end of Hosea. And then you jump to the end of Micha to get this part. So Kamash Balan, Hosea, Micha, Yonah, they're all considered one book. That's why it's allowed. It's all one scroll. And if you're doing this properly, if you were sitting in, let's say, Kumbedisa, or in Abaya's time, or you were there with Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish in Sepphoris and Tiberias and places like that, how do they read the Haftarah? From a scroll. They take out the book of Isaiah and just read it. So if they're reading Hashemayim Kis'i, they would not then take out the Sefer Shmuel just to add one or two psukim. They did not do such a thing. So this idea only gets off the ground if you're rewriting your Haftarah is the way you want to, and not part of the actual scroll. So this is brought by the Rambam, and here in Hilchos Tefillah, we have here how you skip around, and he brings the precedent of the Kohen Gadol. That's when you skip around in the Torah reading. So we have one example similar to that, and then the Shulchan Aruch brings this also, and here the Rambam says that Minavi Lunavi, you can't do that. You can't read a Haftarah from two different Nevi'im. He doesn't bring an exception. So one book of the Navi. Navi, yeah. From Navi to Navi means one book of the Navi.
Why? Okay, I understand that Torah
Yeah.
says one book.
Yeah.
But there's still 12 different Nevi'im.
Yeah,
So
it's just,
that's part of the reason is confuse people.
So when people actually learned the Nevi'im, they didn't learn it as separate books. They didn't. That's a misconception. We shouldn't look at as Treyasar as 12 little books put together from a Kedusha aspect. Halachically speaking, they are one united book. And that's why the Simanim, by the way, you look at the the Siddharim, the old Chalukah that they used to have, that's recorded in the Quran and the other ones like Das Mikra, you see that the Simanim often incorporate parts of different books. Sometimes they don't, like Habakkuk starts his own simon, but it's trying to show you that this is it. This is still one book. Okay, it's still one book. Halachically speaking, it's one book, and that's what the Chazal wanted to emphasize. Don't take out another scroll. One scroll, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And also, by the way, you can't separate it. You can't say, I'm just going to write a Chagai. I'm just going to write a Habakkuk. Why? I can write a Shir Shirim. I can write a Ruth. Those are small books, right? And I have an option to put them together. I just have to leave a certain amount of space between them. When you write Treyasar, you have to write the whole book. If you want to be considered a book of the Bible, you have to write all 12 Nevi'im. Okay? It's one book. That's Allah. That's in Bava Basra. Okay? So that's how we write them. So the Shulchan Aruch actually has a little bit of a contradiction. Look what he says here. The Shulchan Aruch says, "Ivanovi midalgin afilu b'shnei inyanim v'hu shelo yashev b'dilug binyan she'amdu atzibur b'shtika." Okay, not too long of a break. That people are just like quiet break. Remember, this is serious, by the way. Tircha the tzibur used to be a real thing back in the day. And Treyasar you can because it's like one book. It is one book. But then he says in the next seif that there's this minhag that when you have a Shabbos chassan, right before the wedding or right after the wedding. If you're Ashkenazic, it's right before the wedding. If you're Sephardic, it's after the wedding, right? Lomar achar haftarat hashavua. I'm not going to read what the Ramah wrote here because it's a parenthetic statement. Okay, shnayim o shloshah psukim me'aftarot sosasis. You ever see anybody do this before? By the way. When after the Haftarah of the week, you have psukim from Sosa Sis. Sosa Sis is the Haftarah of Nitzavim, or Nitzavim Vayelin. Always the last Haftarah of the year according to the 1 year cycle. So, no, most people aren't familiar with this, but apparently this is what he did. And he mentioned a similar thing, and Rosh Chodesh b'Shabbos u'Yom Rishon, if you have a Shabbos Sunday, Rosh Chodesh, Achar shemaftir haftar b'Shabbos, after you have the maftir, what is maftirin? Maftirin is a verb in Hebrew. Well, it's Mishnaic Hebrew, but it doesn't translate well into English. Maftirin. How do you say the maftirin, everybody, in English? Either way, the Shulchan Aruch sounds a little bit redundant here. Achar shemaftirin haftar b'Shabbos. After you have the whole haftarah, after you do the haftarah of Shabbos, omrim pasuk rishon pasuk acharon me haftaras vayomer lo yosan makar kodesh. Ve'ein limchos biyadam. Now I'll tell you something here. The way you read the Shulchan Aruch over here is that he notes that you're going to challenge what he just said based on the previous seif. Because what he's describing, if it really is the addition of extra verses after the usual Haftarah, you're jumping from Navi to Navi. Why? Because the Haftarah of the week is usually not from Isaiah, unless it's the summertime. Right? It could be any other Nevi'im. But Sosa ceases right at the end of Yeshayahu. And the Haftarah of Rosh Chodesh is definitely, it's the last part of Yeshayahu, but the part of Malchar Chodesh that they're talking about is Sefer Shmuel. But then again, the Shulchan Aruch leaves open this idea that I'm trying to explain to people, which is Achar Haftarah Shavua, then they say Psukim. Okay? Okay? Lomar, the verb is not lahaftir, but lomar, they just say Psukim. It's not written there. And also, when he mentions what happens on Rosh Chodesh, 2-day Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos and Sunday. Look what it says here. Achar shemaftir and haftar b'Shabbos. It's a little bit redundant. We are talking about Shabbos. What does he mean here? It means after you're totally done with the Haftarah, then you say Psukim. So there's already room. It's not so bad. Why? I'm trying to tell him, you don't actually make it part of the Haftarah. It's after you finish with the brachas and everything like that. And it's definitely not written there. He says, just say Psukim. He's going to explain himself. By the way, the Shulchan Aruch mentions this minhag twice. He says it's also in Siman Tuf Kaf Hey. Rosh Chodesh Chal Yos Be'echad B'Shabbos Maftir B'Shabbos Sufan of Amar Lo Yosan Machar Chodesh. And as Rosh Chodesh is 2 days long, what does he say? We have the Maftirs of Shemaim Kisi. V'nohagim Lomar Achar Kach Pasuk Rishon Pasuk Acharon Haftaras V'Amar Lo Yosan Machar Chodesh L'Zecher Shemachar Gam Kein Rosh Chodesh. Right? So he just says, after you're done with the Haftarah, you say these psukim to remind people that tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. as the same Beis Yosef, tomorrow is the Iker Rosh Chodesh. That was the Havamina. There was even an argument. Wait a minute, if today's Rosh Chodesh and tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh, maybe Makar Chodesh takes precedence, because the second day of Rosh Chodesh is so-called 2-day Rosh Chodesh is always what? The actual first day of the incoming month. It's more Rosh Chodesh than the first day. If you could say it that way. By the way, the Ramah in this here and there in both Simonim rejects this minhag outright. He says we don't do this. By the way, that's the Ashkenazic tradition. So I'm surprised that ArtScroll put this in here. But then again, maybe they want to make note of the fact that the Shulchan Aruch does mention this. The problem that I wanted to note was that nowadays they actually write these psukim into the Haftarah. The printers or the people who are making the Haftarah books. The Sephardim are using these Haftarah books that look like Sefer Torah actually have it written there. There's one Haftarah book, the fancy one that the rabbi got last year, which looks like a Sefer Torah. It's written on cloth. It's all the Haftarahs written out on cloth, like a Sefer Torah, but has Nikud to Amin. So that's pretty interesting. It's actual cloth. Why? Because it's a fancy way of doing it. And what's written there? After the Haftarah of Shamayim Kisi, they actually have it written there. So the Maftir fellow, the first person who's actually reading this, says these psukim as part of Torah before he finishes the bracha. So that's problematic. The Gra rejects this, by the way. So you can read here. The Gra gives the sources. He says, like the Ramah, because it's basically jumping from Navi to Navi, which you're not supposed to do. It's bad because that's what it is. He says, but the first Svara said that, well, we're reading out of Chumashim anyways, ain't Kapeda. You already have a Chumash. It's a Chumash, a printed Chumash or a written Chumash. So you write the Haftarah whichever way you want. So there's no real problem, technically speaking. You rewrote the Navi. When you're reading the Haftarah on Rosh Chodesh / Erev Rosh Chodesh, so you're reading Haftarah, you don't know that this part is from Yeshayahu and the next two psukim are from Shmuel. You just read it what's there. Well, so the Gra, what was the Gra's opinion, by the way, in this matter? What did the Gra commission? The writing of a whole new set of Nevi'im in Vilna, so that the Haftarah can be read out of cloth the way it's supposed to be. Okay, that's the Gra's opinion. Not only should you not write a Haftarah book, which doesn't make it clear what parshas you're jumping between, or from Navi to Navi, you should actually just read Hashemayim Kisi out of a properly written book of Isaiah. Were we there on, do you remember what we did on Tisha B'Av? Were you with us on Tisha B'Av this last year? When the fellow read the Maftir on Tisha B'Av? So
no, Tisha B'Av on this.
Okay, so there were some guys with us on Tisha B'Av. We davened, Vasikin, but then before Torah reading the Haftarah, we were on the Temple Mount for Kinnis in action. Don't send down to seeing Kinnis, you actually just go live the Kinnis. But then we went back to hear the Torah reading and the Maftir at the Kotel Plaza. So the minute we were with, the fellow who's going to read the Maftir didn't feel confident to read it out of the cloth, but there was a Sefer Yirmiyahu there. So I used the Sefer Yirmiyahu. I held it up like Rabbi Dulitz style, like this, and I was reading along with him right out of the Sefer Yirmiyahu. So some other guys were there also. And we got to the point where you get just the end of the Torah and you roll it there. That's the Vilna Gaon style. And that's why in major Litvish yeshivas, all the yeshivas worth their salt in America, and major synagogues around Jerusalem all have sets of Nevi'im on cloth. So that you can do it like the Gra. What? Yeah, because you're saying bracha. Yeah, yes, you're supposed to say it. That's what you're supposed to do. Yes, there's a long history of Haftarah books. The Machon Ashkenaz writes about this. The Haftarah book, the book that just has the Haftarahs in it, or read it out of the Chumash. Rabbi Soloveitchik had it of Hakpada. If you're not going to, really, maybe it's better not to use the Haftarah book. Rabbi Hamburger disagrees with this. If you're going to read Haftarah not from cloth, at least read it from a printed book that has the whole Navi here. Or you can read out of even your Tanakh, because the Tanakh has the whole Navi there. When you're going to read a section of Yeshayahu, read from a whole Yeshayahu at least. And others say, no, it doesn't have a din of a sefer because you have to flip pages. Well, it makes a scroll cloth an actual sefer is that you could technically spread it out entirely in front of you and read the entire sefer without flipping pages. That's what makes it a scroll. Printed on one side like that. Okay. Different opinions. So really you shouldn't. So we hold, can you print the Sefer Torah on paper? It would have the same din. Stam. All stam has to be on cloth. So the Rambam says, yeah, the Rambam actually says that there are dinim Like just like your tefillin have to be written on certain type of parchment, and your mezuzah on certain type of parchment. Sifrei Kodesh, in order to be considered Sifrei Kodesh, have to be written like that. The Rambam says basically, here's the laws of how to write a Sefer Torah, and if you want to write the other books of Tanakh, it's the same thing.
So where is it brought down? Is it brought down in the Halacha book? You have to read the Haftarah in the book.
So that's the assumption, just like you read a Torah. But there's a long precedent. Well,
So why isn't it
it's
written?
not mentioned there. It's assumed. Like, why would you not read the Navi when you make a bracha on it? You say just like you read the Torah. There's
Why is
brachas
it
before and
mentioned
after.
for the Megillah?
Well,
Why is it specifically mentioned for the
for
Megillah?
only one Megillah, but there's 5 Megillas.
Seven.
There's one Megillah. Megillus
Six.
Esther
That's
has
specifically mentioned.
Esther's own halachas are unique to it. Yeah, obligations to read it, and that you have to even have it. For some reason, there's no obligation, it says, on every individual to hear the Haftarah, for example, right? Or you have to gather even the women and children, the women especially, to hear the Megillah. Women never have to hear Torah reading, and any reading from the Navi, but Esther they do. It's a good question. The Vilna Gaon answer is, the implied answer, like the Rambam, is that of course you read the Haftarahs from a properly written scroll of the Navi. There was never a Bihavamir. Like that to say, just because you got used to reading out of Chumash doesn't mean that they have to tell you, and by the way, when you read the Haftarah, make sure to read it out of a properly written scroll. That's of course, and that's how you read everything. That's how you do it. That's how you do the mitzvah.
Oh,
So
it's strange it's not written.
yeah, it's strange. That's the implied. So you know what? I should
How-
do a more
like,
thorough
how do we know
examination of
that
this,
Shirat Haftarah is Sulam Peh? Like, how do we
because
know
that's
that-
be read. Matter of fact, it says they read it and then they pause for the the Maturgaman to read the translation, the Aramaic, Targum Yonasan.
But doesn't the Torah have to be again?
Not necessarily, no. He reads it out of a book.
Like,
Also for Torah reading, the Maturgaman reads out of a book.
as in this kind of book, or
It doesn't matter. It does we don't have laws about how the Targum has to be written. It just has to be read by someone. That's what Siluk means. The Baal Kriya of the Torah or of the Navi pauses to read this.
the wrong one said Torah.
Really? Okay, maybe it could. You're not supposed to read Baal Peh, but the Maturgaman made to read Baal Peh. Here it is. Yes. Oh, here's my book of love. Let's get back to the point. The point is, this is the way you're supposed to do it. And the Vilna Gaon also says that the other Megillas, all year round, you read a Megillah on a holiday or whatever it is, you're supposed to say brachas before and after reading that Megillah, even Eicha, right? Correct? You read Eicha from a cloth. I was there. They say the brachas on it. Shechianu also. That's the most wild one. Say a Shechianu on reading Eicha on a Tisha B'Av. Only at night. Okay, so let's see here. So the way the Ramah reacts to the Shulchan Aruch, it's as though these verses were added to Haftarah, but the explanation over here is that, like I said, there is room in the Shulchan Aruch, and I think this is shot in the Shulchan Aruch. The Beis Yosef didn't want to go as far as to say that you should actually add psukim to the Haftarah the way they do in shuls. It's written in there, and before saying even the final brachas, the Baal Kriya of the Haftarah, or the fellow who was the maftir, I guess bought the Aliyah or was honored with the Aliyah, he actually says these verses as part of the Haftarah, as though it's one unit, because that's a problem. Really, he was just saying you should say these verses sometime after saying the Haftarah, and then it's not a problem. So let's see in the Beis Yosef. We'll do it a little bit outside. He brings this halach over here and shows you the sources for it, that you can skip around the Navi. Yeah, it says, really? You should have to say Baal Peh? Wow. What does it say? Read the sentence at the beginning of that. Say it out loud. Louder, clear. What?
ואין המתרגם נשען לא לעמוד ולא לקרוא, אלא עומד ביראה ואימה.
Yeah.
ולא יתרגם מתוך הכתב, אלא על פה.
Oh, so he has to know the whole thing by heart. But was it say anything else about where he reads it from? The Yemenites definitely don't do this.
No,
I was wrong about that.
it continues, ואין הקורא רשאי לסייע לתרגמן, שלא יאמרו תרגום כתוב בתורה.
So maybe he has to memorize it from the Kitab beforehand, or he could look at it. Maybe that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. They're it out loud. He has a prompt or something. Okay, the point stands. Why? What was I trying to say? That the one who reads the Navi reads it from a cloth, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Apparently, why would you ask me? Why didn't I have to say like, well, hamaftir b'Navi tzarich likro me hanavi?
No,
the Navi means of the
it's
scroll of Navi.
there's no. Why is it not written anywhere? Chutz?
I don't know because they never had a Havamina.
I mean, not necessarily because there was just
Yeah.
in place of so
It wasn't. No. That's another thing we saw 3 years ago. The Haftarah is l'chadchila. There is one opinion that says the Haftarah was used at a time of persecution. They even not quite clear. Was it the Greek persecution, the Roman persecution, when they couldn't read the Torah, so they read a section of Navi that was sort of replacement for it. That's not the way many Rishon. That's not a Talmudic statement. The way the Rambam and let's say Rashi understand the Haftarah is that l'chadchila. It's an institution of the sages as part of the Torah reading. And it's not just a minhag that came for some other reason and then it stayed. Otherwise, we'd have a Haftarah with every Torah reading around the year. But instead, no, it seems that the way the Haftarah is just something that was added in certain situations. This is the Vilgaon's opinion also. Certain situations call for Haftarah l'chadchila and certain situations do not. Okay? Rosh Chodesh calls for Torah reading and not for Haftarah. So that's why the Gra says there's a big machlokes. When do you say in the final bracha, if there's a final bracha of the Haftarah reading, first, do you have the fourth bracha or not? Mekadesh Yisrael and something, or Mekadesh HaShabbat, or whatever it is. Do you have that bracha even? A lot of times you read the Navi, you don't have that bracha. And even when you do, what do you include? Do you include the Yontif and the Shabbos, the Rosh Chodesh? So the general practice is you don't include Shabbos, you don't include Rosh Chodesh, even though the Haftarah is obviously for Rosh Chodesh. The fact that it's Rosh Chodesh pushed away the Haftarah of the week, and we said the Haftarah for Rosh Chodesh, right? Yet the bracha only is Bekadesh HaShabbat. Where the Rosh Chodesh mention go? Machlokas, Minhag Ashkenaz. Chol Moed Sukkos, you mention Mekadesh HaShabbat Yisrael, Vazmanim. Chol Moed Pesach, Mekadesh HaShabbat. That's it. So the Pesach is less important than Sukkos. That's the mainstream opinion. The Vilna says no. You always look at what made us read the Haftarah. If it's a situation that calls for a Haftarah, then that's the situation that gets mentioned in the bracha. Shabbos gave us the Haftarah on Chol Hamoed, Shabbos Chol Hamoed, and not Chol Hamoed. So even though it's the theme of Chol Hamoed that mentioned Haftarah, Chol Hamoed that didn't bring in the Haftarah, it was only Shabbos, the bracha is Mekadesh HaShabbat, even if it's Chol Hamoed Sukkos. And what about Yom Kippur afternoon? The Sephardic minhag is, you mention Yom Kippur, you have that fourth bracha there, Mekadesh HaShabbat Yisrael Yom HaKippurim, Mekadesh Yisrael Yom HaKippurim. And Minhag Ashkenaz is what? You don't have that fourth bracha, right? When you read Yonah, you don't have that. And the Vilna explains why. Because Shabbos doesn't call for Haftarah in the afternoon at Mincha time. Only Yom Kippur does. And even then, it's not the Kedusha of Yom Kippur, it's the Kedusha of a Tanis Tzibur. And when you have Tanis Tzibur on a Tuesday, when you have Shavasar B'Tammuz on a Tuesday, there's no fourth bracha in the afternoon. So too, on Yom Kippur, no fourth bracha in the afternoon. No Mekadesh HaShabbat, no Mekadesh Yisrael Yom HaKippurim, no combined bracha. So Vilna Gaon is very consistent with this. He is the most consistent minhag. There's basically Ashkenaz, Ramah / Ramah, Sfard, and the Vilna Gaon on this. Okay, let's get back to the point here. He mentioned this halacha. Do you have it in front of you? It says in the Beis Yosef over here, and he says, "V'achshav noagim b'Shabbos sheyesh bo chasen lomar haftaras hashavua, shnayim u'shlosha psukim haftaras sosasis." Okay, after the haftarah, we say psukim from sosasis. U'she'era rosh chodesh b'Shabbos Yom Rishon achar shemaftir haftarah b'Shabbos. After we say the haftarah on Shabbos, b'Shabbos shows fun of omrim pasuk Rishon u'pasuk acharon haftaras v'yomer lo yonasan makar chodesh. Once again, the way the Beis Yosef is saying it, it's not entirely clear like most people think that. He's actually telling you add these psukim to the Haftarah. He says after you're done maftiring, then we say these psukim. And it's just a minhag, by the way. And then he asks the question, that's in red. Bar-Hayim midagmi Navi Navi. You're going to say, wait a minute, isn't that combining two separate books of the Navi? You're going from Yeshayahu to Shmuel. Problem. V'yesh litmoa ech pashad minhag hazeh. You're really surprised. Where did this minhag come from? How did it spread? So he gives an answer based on the diuk in the Rashi and all that. That once upon a time, You actually had to you pulled out a Navi and you read the Navi, so it was sort of a problem. But nowadays we actually, write our Haftarah the way we want. We basically rewrote the Navi. The Haftarah Shemayim Kisi is just one text, and we happen to add some sukkim at the end, so you can get away with it. The idea that you're jumping from Navi to Navi is now not a problem, and also there's no confusion, Teref Adas and Tircha the Tzibur and the rest of that. Good answer, right? Yes, yeah. So that's the problem, and it also opens up the door for like, you know what? Why don't we just recompose sections of the Navi? This Sephardim have a whole thing that they say end of Tisha B'Av, which is basically taken all from Yeshayahu, various psukim and sections from Yeshayahu that they read. It's like a long Haftarah, hodgepodge of Yeshayahu Nechama psukim, which is very nice, by the way. And they say it right before Mariv, Motzei Tisha B'Av. Very nice, but it's not part of the Haftarah. Or Yehit Bod Hashem L'Olam, the Rambam's Likud Psukim, where before you start saying your Psukim Zimra, after Baruch Shamar, you have, what is Yehit Bod Hashem L'Olam? It's a whole collection of disparate verses from throughout Tehillim. It's one paragraph created from various verses around Tehillim. It's not its own a psalm unto itself. So why can't we do that with Haftarahs? If I could take,
can't do that with Torah reading.
Torah it says you're not allowed to. Once you're with the Navi, this opens up the door for a real Pandora's box of why don't you just rewrite things the way we want. By the way, this is something that the Beis Yosef doesn't mention. The evidence that indeed this whole idea of adding these Machar Kodesh Psukim to the actual Haftarah is a very late idea. Why do we repeat the second to last verse of Yeshayahu when we read in public? Because the last verse, as Rabbi Dulitz said, we got to mention it twice. Yas Kak Simon. What does that mean? Yud Tav is Rashi tables of the 4 books that for which we do this. We read them in public. The last verse is not so good, so we read the second to last verse again to end on a good note. We do this for Yeshayahu, for Treyasar, Koheles, and Kinnis. Correct? You read these in public. You repeat the second to last verse after the last verse. If it was true that you're reading 2 psukim from Machar Chodesh at the end of Yeshayahu, because you don't want to have that Vayu De'Ron L'Chol Basar line as the last line, why do you have to repeat the second to last verse of Yeshayahu before adding Machar Chodesh? You could have just gone into that part of Shmuel that you're saying now, the 2 verses, which end on a good note. You have no reason to repeat that second to last verse. Mashma, that, it's a much later addition, this whole thing. But the Beis Yosef gives a final answer over here, which also fits with what I'm trying to tell you. That's the first answer in the Beis Yosef here is very dochak. The second answer fits a lot better. What is it? The Rav Manoach tirates the Cheva de Sosa sees Karinon al Peh. It's not written there in the Haftarah even, and you're not supposed to write it in your Sefer Haftarahs. Those 2 verses, of Sosa sees or whatever. What do? It's not written there. It's not there in the Haftarah book. La lo shmei dilug. V'chayotzi bazeh kosav Mari ben Chabib zal b'shem who's the Nun Yud v'zeh l'shono shiny sosa sees the la mishum Haftarah kamrin lei ela kazemer ba'alma. When we do that thing for the chassan in sosa sees, right, which is analogous to the Machar Kodesh edition, we're just singing something. We're just singing some verses Baal Peh after the Haftarah. And by the way, I've seen Syrians do this. They have a chassan in town, so they sing a piyut for him after he gets his aliyah. It's not part of the Torah reading, right?
Okay, but there's a big difference between Tzibur is saying it.
The Tzibur. Well, it doesn't really matter. We're talking about the Baal Kriya. Zemer Ba'alma. Well, it does not have sake. So here's how you do it. If you wanted to take Rabbeinu Manoach's teretz and apply it to the Machar Chodesh issue, the fellow reads Hashemayim Kisi as Haftarah, then says the brachas, finishes, and then they have a zemer about on Machar Chodesh to announce to people that tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. It's like Birkas HaChodesh. Telling people tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh. That's all.
Manoach is talking about where you say it after, because otherwise why would it be a problem with Dilug?
Yeah, so it's not a problem with Dilug. Rabbeinu
say it like before the brachas or something.
No. Zemer Ba'alma.
What if he says
The lav mishum haftarah karmina el kazemer ba'alma.
But then they say the kivan is disease kavino no shemay dilug. But if it's after the brachas, then what do I care about dilug? It's not even part of anything.
Yeah. No, that's sorry. There's two answers. Rabbeinu Menolach's answer, and the chayotz bezeh kosaf Rabbi Ibn Habib.
Oh,
Okay, the second answer is more the accurate one. Lav mishum haftarah karmina ela kazemer ba'alma. The Sosa Sis edition is just a zemer afterwards, not part of the haftarah even. And then you read the Beis Yosef in Tuf Kaf Hey, where he explains why Shemayim Kisi takes precedence over Machar Chodesh on a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. Okay, and then he gets into this question: when you do this 2-day Rosh Chodesh business, and you're presumably adding verses to Haftarah, isn't that a problem? And the answer he gives is, like I said before, Kuf Mem Dalid. The answer. Okay, it's not even written there. So first of all, I want to tell the fellow, the Gabbai at the Minyan, your Haftarah book, if you want to do like the Shulchan Aruch, if you have a Haftarah of Shemayim Kisi and you're going to read a little bit of Machar Kodesh with it, make sure it's not written in there. It's not supposed to be written there. And then you could fulfill what the Shulchan Aruch actually wrote twice in the Shulchan Aruch, which is, after you've maftired, you say these psukim to tell people that what? It's Rosh Chodesh. But you're not really adding to the Haftarah. You're not hodgepodging. The second they start printing it in there, and the Baal Kriya of the Maftir actually reads this as part of the Haftarah, he's not doing it right. It's supposed to be a Zemer Ba'alma that's disconnected from the Haftarah, and it's not written there. Then it's not going to be so much of a hefsek. Or he could just be like everybody else, all the other Rishonim, who didn't hold of this outright and rejected this. If you're reading Haftarah, don't get into other psukim from another book of the Navi. Why? Because it creates confusion. It's against what Chazal wanted. By the way, Rashi's explanation of the Gemara is not unanimous. Okay, so no, there is room to argue with this. So there you go. Hope that answers all those questions. I think that once we go back to reading Haftarah is the way the Vilna Gaon imagined it, which would always be from Klaf. And every time, anything you read should be from Klaf. Technically speaking, even reading Tehillim, when you read Hallel, you should read it. I like taking out a Tanakh when I say Hallel. Why? Because it has the Trup. Halavai people should understand the Trup, but a Klaf doesn't have Trup. But really, whenever we read the Megillas, whenever we read the Haftarah, it should be done from a properly written scroll, just like reading from the Torah. And it'll make people realize, oh yeah, these minhagim about jumping back and forth, it doesn't really hold up. It's not what Chazal intended.
If somebody reads
Yeah.
not from the club.
Unfortunately, we have to say yes. Otherwise, everybody's saying Bracha V'Tala, and none of us have actually read the Haftarah.
I mean, it doesn't matter what you feel like you have to say.
I know.
If the answer is not yes, then
Apparently, there is some sort of b'diavad. There's lichatchila you're supposed to, and b'diavad, whatever.
wait for the Haftarah, I can understand, but it's not written anywhere. Because if it's not written,
What?
as I said, if we said that it's not actually written anywhere that you have to, then it says it should be written in the halacha somewhere. If it's,
I think that's what the Rambam means when the Mishnah says Korin Banavi, right? Reading in the Navi, and the Rambam quotes that they meant in the scroll of the Navi, the actual written book. That's what it was.
it says any food, but like
No, they never.
where the laws for Haftarah.
They're
What they have
in
to
the
written
Hilchos Tam.
What does it talk about? Written upon?
It does. You read it. It's a whole thing of the Rambam. You can read it. He tells you how to do it.
Oh, that's what the rest of the books of Tanakh as well.
He assumes that that's how you write it. Yeah. And also the Gemara above Basra assumes that all the Sfarim are written with the same manner. Megillah, they actually have a drush about how to do this. But the assumption is you can even combine Sfarim. You can combine Chumashim with Sifrei Nevi'im. It doesn't count as a Sefer Torah because Sefer Torah, to be a Sefer Torah, has to have the 5 books of Moses as they are, all together, in order. But you could technically combine all sorts of other Tanakh into scroll. Yeah, I saw a Megillah that had the 5 Megillas. It was all 5 Megillas in one scroll. I've held it, so it's an interesting thing to see.
Esther a different size?
No. It was just, they did it the way it says, they'll leave a few lines between each book and write it as everything is.
It
Doesn't Esther have to have bigger font than everything else? No.
no, not bigger font. Second, if you have essentially a Tanakh al cloth, don't they say that there has to be a shinui if you want to read Megillat instead.
Really?
From it, where it has to be, the cloth has to be bigger, smaller, so people.
I think that's only if you're reading it.
What did you say?
I said I think that the font needs to be bigger in the Megillat Esther if it's combined with other Sfarim. Only if you're reading it Tzibur. If you're reading it as a technique, then it's fine, or just to your family or something.
Is that Paskins?
I believe it is. I'll try to find the source.
Problem is a lot of Sofrim. If you're a regular Sofer, especially a Sephardic one, the only thing you're writing are Sifrei Torah, Tefillin, and Mezuzahs. They do not write as a rule. You're not going to find Sephardic and Esther. You're not going to find Sephardic Nevi'im or the other Megillas written in Sephardi writing anymore because they just don't do it. Where do they have this? I don't even know where to get to look. Hold on a second. It's in the Bava Basra there.
In Hilchot Megillah v'Chanukah, Perek Bet, Halacha Chet.
It's a good thing that we're reviewing this. So it says that the actual cloth has to be bigger. Guess that's how they did it. I wish I had checked that Megillah and seen how they did in that particular one. Leon, you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, very interesting. Good. So we learn something new every day. The point is, the assumption was that even the Rambam acknowledged that you'd have a Megillah Esther combined with the other Megillas. The bigger question is, wait a minute. The Holy Ghost says you read like Masechah Sofrim. You're supposed to read all 5 Megillas with a bracha. Okay? Al Mikra Megillah and Shechianu. Every time you read the Megillas, 5 Megillas, 3 Regalim, and on Tisha B'Av and on Purim. Why is that not brought by the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch? It's in Sofrim. It's apparently Jewish tradition. That's why they're the 5 Megillas. Since when do certain? Yeah.
It's not in the Talmud.
Rambam doesn't hold the Masechet Sofrim, but Sofrim didn't make it up. What was that, Leon?
I said it's not in the Talmud, right? It's in another source.
It's not. Yeah, the Rambam doesn't hold the Sofrim as one of the most authoritative sources, right? We saw that before. The Rambam says the last authoritative source was like the one that binds everybody. What? Talmud Bavli. And people misunderstand line saying the Bavli beats the Rishonim. The Bavli is the source. No, it means that the Bavli is the last thing. You would have thought to include everything else. But question is, so wait a minute. Why would the Vilna Gaon hold of such a thing? The Vilna Gaon wouldn't just take something that just appears in the Masechah Sofrim and say a bracha on it and consider it such a big deal. It must be there's an ancient tradition to do so. It's a record of Eretz Yisrael tradition. It was Minhag Eretz Yisrael, not Minhag Bavel. Make sense? Like many other things. This is, what they still did in Eretz Yisrael. So the question is, why in Bavel they read? What?
Is it mentioned in the
I don't know. But then again, not everything that we knew was a difference between Minhag Eretz Yisrael and Minhag Bavel is in the Yerushalmi. Good question. So we should look this up. We should do more on these things. It's interesting. We have our plans, and then we see where these things go. And we went over time, so now we're gonna bid everybody farewell. Have a good Shabbos. Stay safe. Shalom and nitzachon, because that's what we really need in this world. May we see the downfall of the wicked speedily in our days. Be well.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.